This morning we are going to talk about your needs and your wants. But before we move ahead of this, let's define this word. What is actually need and what is actually want? As a human being, what do you need? Food, medicine, yes? A place to stay, okay? Then? Food, medicine, clothes, and a place to stay. Once you have this, is it good enough to survive in this world? But some of us want to have more than this. And that is when you want. That is when you desire. You crave. And we all verily know that this word crave is a very contagious word, as well as also leads to a lot of our difficulties, our hardship, our stress, and of course, our confusion in life. And the key word again here of confusion is actually called dukkha. Dukkha means unsatisfactoriness. So basically, when we become Buddhist practitioners, we are actually trying to find an answer. We are trying to manage, we are trying to find a balance in order to satisfy ourselves with our needs and at the same time address some of our unsatisfactoriness regarding our wants and desires. And therefore, the Buddha verily understands that a lot of us, when we have a lot of unsatisfactoriness or dukkha or sufferings of the mind, is due to our desire and is due to our wants. I think you're all aware that the fundamentals of practicing the Buddha's teachings revolves around what we call the Four Noble Truths. Now, what are these Four Noble Truths? It is actually a formula that was presented by the Buddha in order to resolve our dukkha, our unsatisfactoriness, our desires, our cravings. The first Noble Truth basically says that as long as we are born, we already have what we call the three big unsatisfactoriness of life. What is this? Old age, sickness, and death. That means to say in Mandarin, we say 有生就有老，有生就有病，有生就有死. Birth, the moment we are born, then we have to face. Whether we like it or not, it's inevitable, it's unescapable. And we have to bear with it, we have to live with it, and we have to learn to accept these three miseries, or great miseries. Of course, we don't want it to happen so soon. We don't want to become old so soon. The moment we see our grey hair on the head, wow, a little bit agitated, must go to the hairdresser and dye it black again. The more you dye, the more white it becomes, until you give up. Like what our singer Sally Ye says, you know, no point lah, don't waste time anymore lah, you know. So allow it to turn white, and it was very noble white. It was actually a very fashionable white. Then you begin to accept it. You begin to agree that, well, this is part and parcel of our life. Aging is very natural. Aging is a natural process. Then we begin to face with sickness. As we grow older and older, we find that we have pains, we have weaknesses, we have failures in our organs, and this gives rise to a lot of miseries, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering again. Like it or not, whenever we come face to face with this, sometimes even to the extent of terminal, we are at the last stage. We get miserable, we get very agitated, we get angry over the fact that, why must it happen to me? Why not happen to that person, and why me? So the mind begins to become depressed, the mind becomes to be very unhappy, the mind becomes to be very, what you call, agitated. And these are signs of dukkha, unsatisfactoriness in your life. You are not satisfied with the situation you are in, the condition that you have become. But the moment you look at it and says, well, sickness is a very natural event. Our body will have to fail one day. Our body have to grow old and deteriorate, and probably will never be able to perform the way that we were when we were young. And when we begin to accept these conditions and look at it as a very natural event, you accept it as part and parcel, that acceptance itself will then pacify, will then reduce the misery, will then be able to make you be satisfied with, says, well, since I have only 6 more months, let me enjoy the best food. Let me enjoy the best holiday. Let me enjoy the most quality time with my family. And let me enjoy the fruits of my labor for so many years, and live these 6 months to the fullest. When we think like that, that 6 months can become 6 years. And you live another 6 more years. But if you do not think like that and become negative, become depressed, become unhappy, then that 6 months can become 6 weeks. And it can happen very fast. You deteriorate very fast. So when our mind is at ease, and when our mind is pacified and conditioned, and we are able to accept these phenomena of life, then we are in balance with ourselves. Of course, we know that any moment we are going to breathe our last. We are going to leave our loved ones, we are going to leave the possessions that we have. We are going to separate away from this beautiful world, we call it. And at that last moment, you still cling, you are still miserable, you are still desperate for life and say, can I live some more? Can I continue to breathe? The mind is in the state of disarray. The mind is in the state of disturb. And the feelings becomes very, very agitated and dukkha. Now with that kind of conditions in the mind, knowing that our last thoughts will verily condition the first thought in the continued existence of lives. In other words, when we take rebirth, we are basically a product, a continuation of the last thought that we perceive and have. And thus, we will then have what we call a bad rebirth, we call it. But if we are able to accept and be at peace and says, well, everything that appears will have to disappear, everything that rises will eventually have to fall. Therefore, since it is happening, I'm prepared for the next episode of life. It's like going to sleep tonight and knowingly that you are going to wake up tomorrow. Then you are going to sleep very peacefully. But if you think that you will not be able to wake up correctly, or you may not wake up at all, or you may wake up in a different environment which is not conducive, the worries in that mind will then create a lot of disturbance, and thus you will not be able to sleep. And that sleep is so difficult. That sleep is difficult until that you do not want to sleep. Hopefully you don't sleep at all. You can continue to have your eyes open, but the eyes is so sleepy, the eyes have to sleep. So you put toothpick and push the eyelid up so that your eyes can open and you don't have to sleep. But unfortunately, you still fall asleep with your eyes open. But if only we can say, well, this is part and parcel. I have accepted it. Let it be another chapter which is ending. This is the end of a holiday. And I'm going home. And thus beginning another holiday somewhere else. And when the mind is at that peaceful state, good thoughts, happy feelings, is there a very bad rebirth waiting for you? Because your last thought determines the next condition. Hence, it's very simple that as long as we know that these are the three miseries, then our mind becomes at ease. Our mind is able to accept it. But a lot of us find it very difficult to understand, to have the right understanding, to have the right realization, until we say we want to find the cause for all this unsatisfactoriness that is in our life. Therefore, what was the second noble truth? The second noble truth says, if there is dukkha, then there must be a cause for the arising of the dukkha. So what was the cause? The Buddha propounded that it's because of the three great cravings. The three tangha, we call it, isn't it? Bhava tangha, vibhava tangha, and kamma tangha. What is bhava tangha? Craving for existence. You want to continue to live. You want to live everlasting life. If anybody can promise me an everlasting life, I will grab it, because I do not want to cease to exist. I want to continue to exist because life is so wonderful. So when you have that craving, that force, that momentum, then that energy itself will push you to another birth. And thus you will exist again. You will be born again. And 有生就有老，有生就有病，有生就有死. You will never escape from old age, sickness, and death. Because of craving for existence, bhava tangha. There is another craving, we call it craving for non-existence, which means to say you crave not to exist because life is so unbearable. You have just suffered such great tragedies in life, and you are so miserable and so unhappy that you want to end it once and for all, and the only way to end it once and for all is to don't exist, cease for existence. You want to die. You want to commit suicide. But how many of us commit suicide with a very clear mind, a happy mind, a peaceful mind? Most of the time when you want to commit suicide, you don't go around and tell people, hey, 我要自杀了，再见. 再见. You'll be crying, you'll be lamenting, you'll be angry, you'll be agitated before you take that last action to end your life. That mind is disturbed. That craving force of disturbances and momentum will then again push you to another birth. And then again you get birth again. You will be reborn because you have not ended. That energy, called the mental energies, will continue to go and attach itself to another becoming, to another birth. And thus, lagi sekali, you have to face it all over again, and you can never escape it. That's why we call it the rounds of samsara. You continue and continue. Then we have Kamma Tangha. Kamma Tangha talks about the craving to please your sense doors. The moment you try to please your sense doors, you develop a craving force within you. Now let's take the craving force to please the sense door of the eye. Because you have 5 sense doors. Your eye, your nose, your taste, your hearing, and your touch. And you are experiencing this whole experience in the world, in life, actually through these 5 sense doors. Beauty, color, fragrance, smelly, music, praise, blame, sweet, bitter, sour, smooth, rough, uncomfortable. Imagine if you don't have these 5 sense doors. Is there any more beauty? Is there any more color? Is there any more fragrance? Is there any more music? Is there any more sweetness and sour, bitter? Is there any more rough and smooth? You experience the world through these 5 sense doors. The beauty of it, the color of it, the smell of it. But the moment you are trying to please these sense doors, then there will arise in your mind 3 evil thoughts, or 3 unwholesome thoughts, we call it. What are they? 贪, 恨, 烦恼. Greed, hatred, and delusion. What is greed? Take for example the eye. An object, beautiful object, comes through the eye, but the eye is only a door. That's why we call it a sense door. When it captures this object, it passes the message to your mind. The mind is called the 6th sense, or the 6th sense door. And the mind then says, wow, beautiful. See some more, see some more. So what do? Your eyes open big. Your mouth open big. And then your neck stretches forward. Or your body lounge towards. Because you want to experience and see some more. The more you see, the more you want to see. The more you want to see, the more you want to see. Somebody stand there and say, want to see some more, pay money please. You pay money. You will go working hard. You will go and do a lot of things in order to please that sense doors, giving rise to a lot of what we call greed. The more you see, the more you want to see. And there is no limit to seeing. There's no limit to greed. And therefore, greed continues and disturbs us in our minds. When an ugly object comes through the eye door, goes to the mind, and the mind says, oh, ugly, don't see. Oh, please go away, I don't want to see. But that object has every right to be there. Nah, see. You are so angry, you are so hateful, you are so unhappy. Go away, please. or you even exterminate it. You want to exterminate it. You think of ways to exterminate it in order not to see, in order not to experience it. That turns into hatred. Hen. And hatred is limitless. It's like the 武侠片, 报仇. When you hate someone, you want to 报仇. And what do you call, this man will kill this man. Then this man die. Then the son of this man says, because you killed my father, now I kill you. And this man die. And now the son says to the other son and say, you killed my father now I kill you also. Kill. Then the grandson, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. The world will turn blind. Mahatma Gandhi. Hatred can continue and continue. 仇恨 can continue and never cease. And it's never ending. And that arises because we crave for the eye, to please the eye, but unfortunately sometimes ugly objects or unpleasant objects comes to the eye. Then you have sometimes both pleasant and unpleasant come same time. Now the eye, to see or not to see, to do or not to do, to take or not to take, to go or not to go. You are very confused. You are very deluded. You cannot decide. You are in a state of indecision. We call it fan now. Delusion. Whenever you use one of the sense door, pleasant, unpleasant, both pleasant and unpleasant, the mind will always turn into greed, hatred, and delusion. Tan, hen, fan now will exist. And this mind, if it is dwelling on attachment and craving for all this, the mind will always have greed, the mind will always have hatred, the mind will always have delusion. And it's very unsatisfactory state of mind. Whenever you have bhava tanha, craving for existence, it is unsatisfactory state of mind. Whenever you have bhava tanha, craving for non-existence, you have unsatisfactory state of mind. Whenever you have greed, hatred, and delusion, your mind will always be unsatisfactory. There is always dukkha arising in the mind because of craving that exists in the mind. The third noble truth says that, okay, now you realize that the cause of all the unsatisfactoriness and unhappiness and disappointment and difficulties in your life is because you are craving, you are attaching, you are possessing. Can you let it go? Can you release the attachment, reduce the attachment, eradicate the attachment, bit by bit if possible? Because to expect it overnight is very difficult, because the mind is so encrusted, so stubbornly holding, it's very difficult to let go. Even if it let go for a while, it grips back again. Let go a while, it grips back. Today says, yeah, I let go. Tomorrow say, I want. If only we can learn to 放开放下, release, detach, and renounce. And that's the element of renunciation here. Then we will be free, bit by bit, until one fine day when we totally eradicate craving in our minds. We have no more craving in our minds because we understand what attachment is. We understand what grasping is. And thus the mind is then lightened, free, liberated. And thus the craving do not persist. The craving ceases. The cessation of craving. Then when you have a mind which is free from craving, a very satisfactory mind, it gives rise to a very peaceful, calm, happy, and enlightened mind. You no longer crave for existence. You no longer crave for non-existence. You no longer crave to please your sense doors. Therefore, when you pass away in this birth, where you have already achieved it, you pass with an enlightened mind, you no longer die. Because death means rebirth. So since you have no more craving to exist, then there should be no more birth, no more becoming. You have attained and achieved near, no more, varna, becoming. No more becoming. Cease from birth and death. Cease from craving and passed away into pari-nibbana. Not die, pass away into pari-nibbana. That mental energy ceases to have that craving force to go and attach itself to another being and thus cease from birth. 没有生，就没有老，没有病，没有死。That is the Four Noble Truths. Very simple. It's a formula. It's a formula that we apply in our lives too, in this current daily living. That whenever we meet with any difficulties and any problems and any miseries in our life, which arises in that mind and disturbs us and probing us, all you have to do is remember the Buddha's formula of Four Noble Truths. Are you miserable? Do you feel miserable? Are you unhappy? If you are, then what was the cause? What causes you to be miserable? What causes you to be unhappy? You must be attached to something. You must be attached to something that you don't want to change. You don't want to grow old. You don't want to become sick. You don't want to die. Or you don't want to lose it. You want to continue enjoying it. You want to continue possessing it, but it cannot. It has to change from one form to another. It has to keep on changing because there is no phenomena that is permanent. All phenomena in this universe are impermanent, anicca. It will never exist forever in that form or condition. There is no permanent entity that you can say, don't change. I don't want you to change. I want you to continue to be like this all the time. I want my wife to continue to be beautiful all the time. But one fine day, she turns into an old lady. Then you say, where is my beautiful wife? Change. Are you miserable? If you cannot accept, yes. But you are able to accept, then there is no misery. So therefore, you must be attached to something, your possessions, your career, your wealth, your desires. You want to continue to have that all the time. But unfortunately, these are the vicissitudes and changes that happens in our life. So we must learn how to manage all these changes. It's an art, the art of managing changes, accepting changes, and be pacified with the fact that everything changes. Anicca, there will be no permanent entity. Everything is impermanent. Anatta, there is no permanent form or entity that you can say don't change and you hold it. it will slip away. But if you want to hold it and remain what you want and desire, then you are going to be disappointed. You are going to be unsatisfied, dukkha. That's why we have the three characteristics of phenomena that we always try to learn. We always try to develop an enlightenment and realization in our meditation. To learn that all the phenomena, including our body, including the environment, including the energies that is around us, they are all subjected to impermanence, non-permanent entity, and disappointment if you are attached. Anicca, anatta, dukkha. Until and unless you realize these three great characteristics, there is no enlightenment. This is the catalyst to make you see things as they really are, the absolute truth. The enlightened mind will then arise. Then you will from then onwards, your attitude becomes different. Your attitude is now understanding, the right thoughts, and you will lead to the right action, the right speech, right livelihood, right effort, and right mindfulness. The Noble Eightfold Path. This morning, as a start, as a trailer, you have just learned the whole fundamental of the Buddha's teaching in just 15 minutes. I hope you are enlightened now. But semua ini senang cakap tapi susah mau buat. Ya, 我了解了. I understand. But you fall back into your desires. You fall back into your wants. You fall back into your, what you call, cravings. So now how? You still got to continue to live. You still continue to have, what you call, have families. You still continue to have your, what you call, ambitions, your works, and your life. So we have to accept the fact that today is not the day to become enlightened. Today is the day we have to learn how to balance. While we are moving along this journey towards enlightenment and final liberation, it may take years. It may even take lifetimes, many lives to come. But as long as that when you want to begin with the journey, the first step is very important. Because the first step is going to lead you to the second step, then the third step, the fourth step, and then you are on the journey. Until and unless you're prepared to take that first step, you will be still wandering around. We call this putujana, not putumayam. Putujanas. That means whirlings. So today, understanding this situation, you and I, we are still not enlightened beings. So we are putujana. So we better discuss things on putujana level, rather than these ideals. And then eventually use this as our chart, as our destination. And that's what all Buddhists do. And finally, then we are able to slowly balance ourselves, reconfigure ourselves, replan ourselves, and then leading us to that destination. So we are called Pudujanas, or we are called lay Buddhists, right? How many of you are monks and nuns here? None. How many of you want to become monks and nuns here? Not yet. Still very far-fetched. Yeah? You still got your work, you still got your family, you still got your children to take care, you still got your spouses, and you still have your friends, you still have your family, siblings, many things you still have. So you are still a Pujajana. And the Buddha did not say that every one of you has to be a monk or nun or renunciate in order to, what you call, practice the Buddha's teaching. As a pudujana, as a willing, you still can practice, but of course there are certain applications that will be relevant for a willing or a lay Buddhist, and there are applications for those who says, well, they want to renounce and become monks or nuns. Now you basically have confidence and faith in the Buddha's teaching after listening for so many times, and then you resolve to believe, to study, and to practice the Dhamma, and you cherished the Sangha, the order and the brotherhood of those who have renounced and those who are learned, in order to learn from them the steps to take in order to achieve that destination. And of course you commit yourself to the three refuges, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, which means to say from now onwards you go to no other refuge except the Buddha as your teacher, the Dhamma as the teachings, and the Sangha, the order of brotherhood which you learn and discuss and seek counsel whenever we are in need. 皈依三寶 is a very important commitment. Many of us have not really taken our refuge. We are just here as a student of the Buddha's teaching. Learn first, and then only you decide whether you want to fully commit or not. So you have not been baptized yet. But there will be a time when you say, I'm now ready. I'm now ready to take the refuge. That whenever I have any difficulties in my life, I will go to the Buddha for my first refuge. So a lot of us, when we are in desperation, in trouble, and we are disturbed, we come before this shrine hall. We knelt, we pay our respect, and then we seek the guidance of the Buddha, knowing that the Buddha has passed into Parinibbana, but this is a symbol. And then you sit down here in quiet, in silence, in solitude. You reflect. You reflect upon the Buddha's virtues. And therefore, looking in front, it says that this is a man, a human being, who had for many lives, and subsequently in his last life as Gautama, Siddhartha Gautama, attained enlightenment and the formula and the teachings, the Dhamma. And thus, being a good teacher, has enlightened many, has assisted many and helped many, and has overcome his question of old age, sickness and death. Remember the foresights? Where he wanted very much to solve this once and for all. And he has found the answer. And he has resolved all his miseries and unsatisfactoriness of dukkha. No more dukkha, because he has ceased from craving. If he can, so can I. I will then be able to overcome. I will then be able to resolve my problems and my difficulties. You get inspiration. You get guidance. But many of us, when we come before this Buddha image, pay our respect, and then we look at him. Do I really know you? You only come once a year, and once a year also chong mang mang, pray, get the string tight, get the water drink, and then after that go home. Wow, your battery recharge for 1 year. Visa is coming. Your relationship is very shallow. You have not been paying respect every day with a Buddha Rupa in your house. You have not been able to reflect upon his teachings. You have not been able to learn about his life story. You have not been able to understand who this person is. So therefore the relationship becomes very shallow, very impersonal. And thus when you come before him in that period and in that time, it doesn't really help you much. So what do? It can't help you. Your first refuge is of not much help. But never mind, you still got your second refuge, isn't it? Because you take 3 still got backup. So you say, what is my second refuge? My second refuge is the Dhamma. The Dhamma is the teachings, the quotations, the sayings, the books that you have read, the lectures that you have listened, the sermons that you have participated, the pujas. And then relying upon the words that ring here and says, the Buddha says, when you are sick, don't allow your mind to be sick. That word at that time when you heard it, that sentence, doesn't mean anything to you. But when you are in the state of sickness, then those words ring out so meaningfully and say, since I'm already sick, don't allow my mind. My body is sick, but let not my mind be sick. Let my mind be at peace. Let my mind be at calmness. Let my mind be able to think and pacify. And with a clear mind, with a happy mind, with a peaceful mind, you find that you are able to accept your sickness, number one. Number two, you are able to then find answers. Because with a desperate mind, you cannot find answers. But when you are at peace, the answers will then come up one by one. The words of the Buddha will then come up one by one. The advice that is given by others, which is helpful in this condition and situation, will then come up one by one. But a lot of times when we come to listen to the Buddha's teachings and sermons and talks, sini masuk, sini keluar. Which means to say, what did the Buddha teach? What was the teaching that is applicable for this kind of situation? You find that you are at loss. You don't know what to do. So therefore, the second refuge may not be of help. You still got your backup. What was your third refuge? Sangha. Let me approach the Sangha. But the Sangha doesn't necessarily mean the monks or the nuns or the renunciates. It can mean some senior brothers and sisters, well-versed in the Dhamma, who are able to counsel and eventually advise you, tells you the way. Or you participate in what we call a group, a circle. Sometimes they will then discuss problems. And of course you would like then to sit in that circle and seek the counsel and says, I have this problem. And then they will then advise you. But most of the time we are shy to tell our problem. We don't want to present that problem in the public. Never mind. You go to that council or the circle and says, my friend got a problem like this. Of course, they will understand. They will say, now tell your friend. This is how the problem is solved. And then you listen. You then find some enlightening messages and quotations and teachings, which then he says, why not apply it? Why not I try it out and see whether it helps me or not? And then eventually you find that the problem is resolved as a result. But if the Buddha, the Dhamma and Sangha still cannot help you, then never mind lah, go to the stone outside there and pray to the stone and says, may the stone spirit now help me and all this. But we are all very sure as practitioner of the Buddha's teachings, that whenever we have any difficulties in our life, we just have to go to the three refuges: the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. You don't even have to reach the Sangha. Sometimes by just understanding what the Buddha represents, by just understanding what the teachings says, the problem will then be easily resolved by yourself. So we take the three refuge and we commit it, maybe on a ceremony called the Gui Yi San Bao ceremony. So on that day itself, you gather together with the rest of your friends and brothers and sisters who want to do it on the same day, and then you are invited by a monk who then says, recite after me. And this time you really recite it with a lot of commitment and says, Buddhang Saranang Gacchami, Dhammang Saranang Gacchami, Sanghang Saranang Gacchami, for the second time and for the third time. And you see that commitment embedded inside the mind from then onwards. Then you are a good lay Buddhist. Of course, all Buddhists have to follow a code of ethics. Rules, which mean to say the 5 precepts. Now, what is the 5 precepts? The 5 precepts are basically rules for us to try and abstain. Of course, it's not commandments. It's not forcing you. It's not what we call either you do it or you don't. But you try your best. And these are the guide. You try your best to abstain from taking lives unnecessarily. You abstain from taking things which are not given to you. You try your best. If these are not given to you, then don't take. You abstain from sexual misconduct, involving yourself in misconduct of the sexual manner. You abstain from saying things which are not true. And you abstain from taking any intoxication which can cause you to lose your mind. You try. The more you try, the more credible you are. The more you try, the more what you call singyong. People will then trust you. People will then be able to say that you are a good person. You are trustworthy. You can be believed. And you can help the society. And not only that, you feel that elation, that peacefulness in your mind that you are a person of good character and ethics. And that's the taking of the Panchasila, or the 5 precepts. So these are called lay Buddhists. And each one of us is in this category. Now the Buddha in the Samanaya Pala Sutta, which is in the Dikha Nikaya, the fruits of contemplative life. How to live a contemplative life and what are their benefits. The discourse tells the story of King Ajatasattu, who is the son of King Bibisara of Magadha, who then posed the following questions to a lot of leading Indian teachers. At that time, a lot of Indian teachers. So when King Ajatasattu presented this question, finding that he could not get the answer, he then decided to ask the Buddha, what is the benefit of living a contemplative life? The Buddha provides the Buddha's own description of the lifestyle, mental, psychic, and spiritual benefits. And this sutta also provides one of the most detailed accounts in the Sutta Pitaka of the Buddhist community code of ethical behavior. Of course, through Ajatasattu confessed transgression, that he has committed quite a number of transgression. The narrative also illustrates the Buddhist notions of merit and karma to those associated with other contemporaneous teachers who then teach immorality, fatalism, materialism, eternalism, and agnosticism. Now, what did the Buddha elaborate? He talks about solitude delight, Contemplative life gives you a lot of solitude. When you are free from the influence of others. In other words, you are an island to yourself. If you are that, then you have what we call solitude freedom and solitude delight. The other one, of course, is you are filled with virtues. When you practice the contemplative life, you have virtues, you feel good about it, you rejoice, and eventually you see no danger from anyone else because you are a good person. People find it less opportunity to harm you. So endowed with this noble aggregate of virtue, you are then inwardly sensitive to the pleasure of being blameless. You try to do things which are not blameful. Then, of course, you become simple. Simplicity, contentment. You take the barest necessities. You go for functional use rather than desires use. Things which function. A car with 4 wheels, which can bring you to places and transport you to the market, transport you to work. What are a car? A car which can do that function. Not a car which is for showing off, a car which boom, boom, and then eventually gives you a lot of ego and pride. There, simplicity goes into functional way of living. Then you maintain mental calm, a lot of peacefulness. With mindfulness and with alertness, you are free from the 5 hindrances. You get jhanic bliss. At certain times of practice, you get an ecstasy. What you call a rapture of elations. A rapture of joy. You feel so good. You feel so happy. And of course, you have insight knowledge. You begin to see things correctly in the right perspective, in its absolute truth, the way it should be. Then your mind becomes very clear and you will have the right understanding. And of course, you are released from samsara. You're bound from samsara, which pulls you back every time. That rope itself becomes thinner and thinner and thinner. And this is in preparation. You have done a lot in this journey to slowly reduce the binds of samsara. So upon hearing the Buddha's explanation, Ajatasattu then became what we call the lay follower, a lay Buddhist. But when we talk about desires and wants, it's very important to differentiate. That as ordinary lay person, sometimes we say, oh, give up, renounce, give away, throw your Mercedes into the river, throw your TV into the sea. Is it that extreme? Remember, the Buddha's teachings follows what we call the middle path. Don't go to the extreme of practice. You become very queer. You become very extraordinarily different. There are some people who, after a retreat, thought that they are enlightened. And they walk with their eyes closed. Step by step want to climb up the bus. Before they could climb up the bus left already. We have to be pragmatic, we have to be practical. Some of these practices is reserved only in the retreat. Right? Of course, it slows you down. It gives you back your alertness. It gives you back your sanity. It gives you back your, what we call sensitivities. But at the same time, we must learn that we are not yet in that capacity. We are in this capacity. Therefore, we still have to manage our life. We still need that balance. Although all the maxims is very, very good. Much as we wanted it, but unfortunately we have to look what we are now. That's why the Buddha, after Rahula became a monk or renounced, King Suddhodana appealed to him and says that you cannot simply just go and, okay, you want to be a Buddhist, become a monk. You want to be a Buddhist, you become a monk. You want to be a follower of the Buddha, you become a monk. The Buddha says, in order, what they call King Suddhodana appealed and says that in order to become a monk, you have to seek the permission of the parents, if it is a young minor. Or if they are married, then they should seek the permission of their spouse, of their parents, of their spouse, of their family, and thus then only you can accept them as full renunciate. Otherwise, 暂时出家. We call it novitiate or novice. Remember, when you become a monk, you have two ordination. One is called the lower ordination, and the other one is called the higher ordination. The lower ordination is called a samanera. The higher ordination is only when you become what we call a full-fledged venerable or monk, or bhikkhu we call it. So at this stage we want to have a career, we want to earn a living, we want to become rich and wealthy. How many of you says, I don't want to become rich or wealthy? We all want. We want to be wealthy with meaning. And that is why we are going to talk about being a rich Buddhist or a poor Buddhist. You don't want to be a poor Buddhist because life can be miserable if you are a poor Buddhist. You can't afford to donate to Bandar Utama if you are poor. You can't afford to offer dana if you are poor. You can't afford to share with the needy and the underprivileged if you are poor. You need to have some wealth. You need to earn a good living. You need to have good salaries. You need to improve yourself and progress yourself up the ladder in order to be successful in life. And that is the reason why now we have made this one of a very popular subject amongst our youth today. You notice that in this room itself, how many of you are below 21? All 40, 50, 60, 70. We are already leaving very soon already. But why are the youths not here? They always have this impression that the Buddha's teaching do not advocate success in life, do not advocate the pursuit of wealth. So they would rather go and listen to Anthony Robbins, Bob Proctor, and probably Joey Yap. Because now you notice Joey Yap's classes are different now. It tells you how to motivate yourself and to be successful in life. We have to have messages and teachings that approaches the youth and says, look, the Buddha's teaching not only teach you to renounce, the Buddha's teaching also teach you how to be successful in this life, how to become what you call somebody, and then be able to provide for the sasana. In other words, teaching you how to be a rich Buddhist rather than be a poor Buddhist. And we have been quite successful. We have created many groups now for the youths. Some of them graduates. They come for this kind of a session. We call it Dhamma Works. Dhamma in the workplace. How to apply the Buddha's teaching in the workplace or in business, called Buddhist Business Network. And we have even what we call Youth Success Development Program. And these are now in the Buddhist circles because we know that the only way to go forward, to approach the young, is actually through this, to bring them affinate and align to our Buddhist communities. Otherwise, they will be slipping away. They will be joining all the witnesses and what do you call it, all the evangelists. And thus, you will then be able to have only Buddhist society for the aged and in the senior living homes. Now, when we say rich Buddhist, what do you mean by rich? Having more than enough of material possession or money that is necessary to satisfy the desire, the needs of a desired lifestyle. Now, all of us, though we say that the 4 basic needs, food, medicine, clothes, and shelter, is important. These are basic needs. And we work hard in order to provide comfortable basic needs, sufficient basic needs for ourselves as well as for our family, and sometimes even for our community. But can you have more than that? If you have more than enough material possession or money that is surplus from the needs, then you are said to be rich or wealthy. Of course, poor means you lack in material resources with little or no means to live a comfortable life according to your expectations. Homeless, hardly have your 3 meals. Your clothes are tattered and torn. Your shelter is leaking and uncomfortable. And when you are sick, you have no ways to get medicine for cure. Or you can't afford the expensive medicines that is necessary to eventually cure this kind of terminal or serious illness. And when you are in that situation, then you are said to be poor. So let's categorize ourselves. How many of you are in that rich category? And how many of you are in that poor category? Majority is the top one. You have more than enough. To a certain extent, you have more than enough. That's why you don't spend your Sunday going out to sell nasi lemak or what do you call, trying to make a living. But you have time to devote, time to spare, and even wealth, surplus, in order to help not only yourself, not only your family, but to help others. So what is a true measure of wealth? Most culture today would have us believe that wealth is measured by how many material things you own. But we are taught that you can never have enough, isn't it? So many of us feel discontented and dissatisfied. So the mandate to consume and buy more and more will then translate into a desire that can all too easily become a bottomless pit. Are we falling into this? And that's what the Master Ching Yin, in his book called Living Affinity, tries to depict that if you are not careful, then you are pursuing a wealth into this category. Then the question is it wrong to pursue wealth? Remember, just now I gave you a lot of words like give up lah, renounce lah, let go lah, don't pursue wealth, if possible, because wealth is evil. Wealth will destroy you. I think this is all too familiar messages that we hear. No. You must look at the positive aspects of wealth, and at the same time look at some of the Buddha's suttas that expounds it to the lay people and encouraging them to pursue wealth, but in a good manner. So the Buddha has teachings, has suttas that help us to pursue wealth. One of it is Adiya Sutta, where he says that my wealth has been enjoyed, my dependents supported, protected from calamities. I've given supreme offerings and performed the 5 oblations. I've provided for the virtuous, the restrained, the followers of the holy life. For whatever aim a wise householder would desire wealth, that aim I have attained. I've done what will not lead to future distress. So when this is recollected by a person established in the Dhamma, he is praised in this life, he is praised after life, and he rejoices in the heavens. So the Buddha says, go ahead. If you are wealthy, go ahead. If you are pursuing wealth, go ahead. But remember your duties and your obligations. In Theravada Buddhism, it is not wrong to accumulate or create wealth, but you must learn to give it away in the form of dana, generosity. That means if you have some to spare, give it for the benefit of others. You rejoice more than keeping it in your vault, into your saving box, and count it every day like old King Cole. Old King Cole counting his money. Huh? I remember there was this Punjabi man. Whenever we go to the safe deposit box in one of the banks in Kuantan, this Punjabi man will be there every morning. And he not only have one box, he has 5 boxes on the bottom. Because on the bottom always the bigger ones. And every morning he will open up all the boxes. And he will sit on the floor because he cannot carry it to the room. And he will count the certificate. He will count some of the cash inside. He will count the jewelry that is kept. Old King Cole counting his money. But when you look at his turban, so many holes, and you look at his slippers that he wear, it's already no more sole. You know, the sole. This one is wealthy, but don't know how to use. If only he can, think of performing some dana. He not only will rejoice his wealth, he will also rejoice in his deeds. So the role of wealth is to provide adequate basic needs for oneself and society, but not to the extent that it encourages greed and indulgence. So Mahayana Buddhism talks about accumulation and possession of wealth was good as long as one do not get attached. Don't get attached. If you have it, good, enjoy it. But you don't have it, well, it's part of the impermanence that you face in life, the ups and downs, the vicissitudes, the loss and gain. Stock market may collapse today, but don't worry, you will come back again. When it goes up, hey, don't be too big-headed and rejoice first, because if you are not careful, it will come down again. Up and down, up and down. In fact, the sine curve is actually the symbol of life. Our breath also like that, our heart also like that. Up and down, up and down. You look at your cardiogram, and all energies are like that, because sine curve is a symbol of frequency. Sine curve is a symbol of wavelength. And frequency and wavelengths are the characteristics of energy. And we are a combination of 2 forms of energy called mental energy and physical energy. That's why we are called a psychophysical being. So we are part and parcel of the energies that exist within this universe. So what do you use your wealth? You use your wealth for food and clothing, maintenance of your parents, wife, children, for illness and emergencies, and of course, for charitable purposes. And for the performance of the following: treating your relatives, treating your visitors well, offering alms in memories of the departed that means transference of merits, offering merits to the deities, and of course, remember to pay your tax. They say in life, there's two things you cannot escape. One is called death, the other one is called tax. So if you are able to accumulate wealth, you have to pay for all these things. You have to maintain all these things. So therefore, wealth is useful because you have these obligations. Now, there are happiness that you can derive from wealth. In the Digajanu Sutta, the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha mentioned that there are actually 4 types of happiness. The first one is called happiness of ownership. Most of us are actually what we call leaseholders in many things. We hold a rent or we hold a lease. Do you own your house? If you are still paying installments, you have not owned your house yet. The house actually doesn't really belongs to you. But the moment you finish paying your installments, the sense of joy, the sense of elation, the sense of happiness. If only you can have wealth that can pay off that sense of ownership will then arise. Anavaja Sukha is the happiness that derives from wealth which is earned by right livelihood. And that is a happiness that we all want to have. You do not cheat. You do not what you call swindle. You do not involve yourself in illegal trades. You have right livelihood. And thus you earn your money through the rightful means. Your mind is always at peace. Anyana Sukha is when you are not in debt, when you are free from debts, which means to say you have paid up all your debts or you don't owe anybody any money. Of course, we say that we can only do that when we are pensioned or retired. Hopefully by then we don't owe any more money to the banks or to anyone else. Then the life becomes much more happier and simple. Then the Bhoga Sukha is when you share your wealth with others. Now sometimes when you have wealth, although you spend yourself or you spend very little on yourself, it's compared to the happiness that when you start to give and you see other people benefiting from it and enjoying what you have given. And eventually then they came back and then sometimes talk about it or report back to you or even commented that they have actually become happier because of your assistance. How happy would you become? You have sponsored some children, you have given to a Buddhist center so that many people will then have opportunities to learn about the Dhamma. You have taken care of some, what you call, aged homes in long term, and you have taken care of some, what you call, orphanages. Compassion is actually one of the virtues that you can derive. And a lot of time we always encourage you to have compassion in a long-term basis. Now most of us have very short-term compassion. Vesak Day is coming. Oh, must do something good. So you take a big basket of things, you go to the, what you call, orphanage, and you give to them and says, "How this is for you, thank you, bye-bye." For another 364 days, whether the orphanage is still existing or not, you don't know. But why not take full, what you call, concern and care that you visit it every week, or you ensure that they are taken care of in certain provisions that they need. All the coffee powder will come from you, therefore you make sure that they have enough coffee powder every day. That is called long term. So it must be practiced on the long term, and the amount of happiness you get from there. So there are, of course, 4 kinds of bliss. We say the bliss of having, the bliss of making use of wealth, the bliss of debtlessness, and of course the bliss of blamelessness. These are the 4 types of happiness. And of course the bliss of having and the bliss of wealth and the bliss of debtlessness refers to the wealth usage. And the bliss of blamelessness means you have actually gained your wealth without hurting anybody. Then you are blameless. And this is one of the sutta, which is called Anyanya Sutta. Okay, I just have to cut short this because I think it's the same, and let's just move us to, in that sutta itself, Dikajanu also asked the Buddha what will bring about happiness in this life as well as the next. The Buddha explained that you must be skillful, efficient, energetic, and the production of wealth through your skilled and earnest endeavor, which means to say, using your own skills and upskill yourself all the time. Protect income through the righteous way, having good and faithful and virtuous and helpful friends, kalyana mittas. I think just now I mentioned this word called Buddhist Business Network. Now we have this network where we work together with all the fellow Buddhist brothers and sisters, and each of them sometimes engage in the trade of their own, and we will then have what we call a kalyana mitta group, where in case we have, say, insurance to provide, there are people who are in the insurance line. In case we have building materials that we need to buy, there are people in the building materials line. In case we have some legal work that we need to do, there are some lawyers in that network that we have. And thus we then help each other. And number one, create what we call a network of kalyana mittas. And this is the one, where virtuous friends who will then ensure that they follow the Buddhist code of ethics in the way of doing business. And lastly, of course, living within one's means. Many of us spend more than we can earn. Yeah, the thing is, buy now, pay later kind of mental attitude, and the credit card is one of the worst. So we have to live within our means, and that means we have to actually contain ourselves. Now, to end this morning's discussion, we basically say that yes, you have your needs and you have your desires, you have your craving, but you need to balance it. And when we talk about the wealth that you are going to accrue and the success that you are going to have in your lives, you must always have what we call a purpose in your mind. What is your purpose in life? Your purpose is to be successful, so that you will then be able to provide and help others. Then you have what we call a rightful purpose. So the wealth that you accrue then becomes very meaningful.